Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started now. Thank you so much for joining us for our block captain training. This is one of my favorite times of the year because one of the things that I think is most important for us to be able to do as Richmonders is to be able to work together with one another on safety issues for our neighborhoods. I'm born and raised in Richmond. I grew up here and went to school here. I've been working with the department for almost about 18 years now. And I still live in the city of Richmond, and I love the city of Richmond. And I think that there's no better way to be able to serve our community and our neighborhoods than to really get together and band together and make sure that we're all safe and we're looking out for one another. So tonight, you're going to learn about how to be a block captain. And being a block captain is something that in the past you may have heard of. It may have just been we look out for each other. I don't know if any of you had the experience of growing up in a community where if you did something, by the time you got home, your mother knew about it because someone on the block would have called and told her what happened. And that was because we had a system of neighbors that watched out for each other. Or if something happened, maybe there was the neighborhood house where everybody went to kind of go hang out. And maybe there were neighbors that when you went on vacation, watched your house, watched out after your house for you, or looked out what was going on in the neighborhood to kind of keep up with what was happening. That's really the fabric of what builds community in neighborhoods. And I think over the last 20, 30 years, we've lost a lot of that, right? Neighbors are more disconnected than they used to be. And so we really have to work to try to build that togetherness as community. Why is that important for us here at the police department? Well, it's important because you as neighbors are going to 9 times out of 10 see something that is amiss in the neighborhood before the department does. You're going to be the first set of eyes and ears. You're going to know what's going right in the neighborhood, and you're going to know what's going wrong in the neighborhood. So today we're just going to talk about how you can set up a neighborhood watch. And if you are a leader of a neighborhood watch, what's your role? How can you start this program in your local neighborhoods? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm already sharing my screen, but I'm going to go ahead and pull up my presentation so that you can see it more fully. And so today we're going to be talking about block captain training and empowering the community through crime prevention. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through a presentation and then I'm going to have plenty of time left over for question and answers. So if you have a burning question that you really, really want to share, there's 2 ways you can do that. You can either drop it in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll come back to it afterwards if you don't want to kind of say it out loud and I'll read it. Or you can also raise your hand when it comes time for question and answer, and I'll be able to dig into that. We're also recording this meeting. That means we'll be able to share it with people who want to see it. And so you can share it with your neighbors, or maybe there's other people who weren't able to be a part of this, and they'll get a chance to be a part of this and learn more about it. So we are the Richmond Police Department. And so this is our commitment to you for community policing. One thing that's important to understand about the Richmond Police Department is that the Richmond Police Department is not just made up of officers. The Richmond Police Department really is made up in terms of how we respond to calls with you. All of our calls for service come and they're generated for the most part by the public. It's not generated by just officers driving around, although they do that. This symbol doesn't just represent the department. This symbol actually represents all of us working together as a community to be able to identify what's going on in a neighborhood. If you hear loud noises on your block, if you know that there's a neighbor that might be elderly and who's in need, all those things and those calls for service that we get, and we get thousands upon thousands of calls every year, come from you. And so if we don't have a strong community, we really can't do our job. So just a little bit about, some of what we do. We do have a population about 110 to 120,000. We have a very diverse community. Even though, knock on wood, our homicide rates are lower than they've ever been. We've had about 0 homicides to date. Going forward from this date, which is a record that we've had in our community, we still have other crime trends in the community that are concerning. And so it's important for us to be able to work together as a community to be able to address crime. Community involvement is really important. And so what does community involvement really mean? Well, community involvement means that it's important for not only you to know your neighbors, which is important, because if you don't know your neighbors, you can't really identify what in the neighborhood is going wrong. You can't really identify if something's amiss if you don't know your neighborhood and you don't know your neighbors. But it's important for you to also know the police department. Who's your beat officer? Obviously we have a little over now, kind of we're inching up towards, I think, 125 officers, but that includes the chief on down in terms of the level of policing that we have in the city right now, in terms of the number of officers that we have on the streets or doing detective work or other things. So it's obvious in a city of 110, 120,000, not everybody's going to know their beat officer by name. But what is important is that you know how to get in touch with us. You know how to call us through the dispatch system. You know how to, if you're having a neighborhood meeting, invite us out to be able to attend. You know how to connect with the department. Those kinds of things matter. And so that's one of the reasons why we're doing this training, is so that you know who to reach out to. There are so many people, when something goes wrong in the neighborhood, I see it on Nextdoor, I see it in community groups, you probably do too, who say, who do I call? How do I get this taken care of? There's a homeless encampment at the end of my street. There's sideshows that happen, routinely on Saturday night. There is, graffiti that's happening on my block, or I have, prostitution that's happening on the left side of this side of Esmond or going down through 24th Street. Believe it or not, I hear a lot of those complaints and concerns because as crime prevention manager and crime prevention team, we hear a lot of the community concerns. And, people say, well, let's call the mayor, let's call the city manager, let's call the chief. And while it's perfectly okay for you to exercise your ability to contact all those people, I can tell you, as someone who used to work for the mayor, who currently works for the chief, and who's been working for the department a long time with the officers, is those calls are going to trickle down to a beat officer who's going to get a call and say, hey, can you go check this out? So it is good for us to build those relationships directly with the police department. So a couple of things I wanted to kind of focus on is the department's really focused on community-focused policing. And so that means we want to get to know you. We want to, when you have your neighborhood council meetings, when you have your neighborhood watch meetings, we want to be able to come. We want you to be able to invite us. And we may not be able to attend to every single one, but we want to do our best to attend as many as we can. We want to be able to be collaborators with you. So if there's a problem that's going on in your neighborhood, whether it's a nuisance house, I don't know if you know this, we have a new quality of life attorney in the city. Did you all know that? I'm seeing some heads shaking. And so she's brand new, and her role is really to work on the city. Like if we have nuisance properties, and try to find out, well, what can we do to get the drug house on the corner shut down? Do we need to use code enforcement? Do we need to use other methods to be able to identify that? Do we use calls for service? Do we use information that might come through our crime analysis unit? So those are kinds of ways that we can collaborate with you. If we have some kind of an issue that's going on in the area, like whether it's speeding or other things, we want to be able to work with you on that. We also want to be able to make sure that there's support for you as a block captain. If you're a person who says, hey, I'm a leader, I know a lot of these folks on this block, I know a lot of the concerns, I'm willing to get people together so that they can start calling in and sharing information, getting to know their neighbors and reporting police. We want to support you. That's what our crime prevention team, myself and Anna, we're here to do. We're here to provide you with some assistance and support to be able to do that. We'll make sure that once you get registered and trained and you complete some of your meetings, that you get signage. So everybody who registered today is going to get your plastic window signs. Anna already has the packages prepared for you. So we'll be able to have those for you, or either mail those to you or you can come pick those up. But more than that, if you get stuck, if you're like, hey, Michelle, we're having some problems. Do we need to call engineering because we're having some problems with the street signage, or we're having some problems over here with prostitution, or we're having some problems over here with a certain kind of issue. If we can't solve it from a police department standpoint, then we can connect you with other city services that can help you. So that's what crime prevention is here to do, to kind of be a link for those kinds of things that you might need some support with. And the other thing is some crime prevention strategies. So a lot of these crimes that are happening in city of Richmond and all over really are crimes of opportunity. You don't know how many calls for service an officer goes to and he sees like a smashed car window. Well, what was sitting in the car? A purse, or it was just something that was sitting in the car that was interesting to people, and it might not have even been very expensive at all. Let's just be honest. It may not have been expensive at all, but the thief saw that, they say, hey, there's something here I can take, and they took it. And so just simple things like clearing out your car, making sure you have a car alarm or an anti-theft device for your home. You know, if you have an alarm, use it. Making sure your porch lights have a timer. Some very basic and simple things can help you from being a victim of some of these crimes. So the first thing that you need to know as a block captain is who you're going to call. How do you contact people? And so one emergency contact is dialing 911. When do you dial 911? In the event of emergency, right? So a crime is in progress. You see someone coming and they looked into the car window, and now they've broken the window and they've snatched something out of the car. Obviously, that's a crime in progress. You're going to call that in. Now, when do you call non-emergency? That's kind of the tricky part, right? So a non-emergency call is a call that you make, and it's not to the 911, but it's a call you make of something that is of concern, but it's not a crime. And so this is the part where it takes a little bit of education, in the community of, what should they be, working on specifically for this. So for example, take that same example that I gave to you about somebody who was kind of peeping in a car window. Well, if you see somebody peeping in a car window, there may be a legitimate reason in there. Maybe they lost their keys in there. I don't know what it is, but it may not be legitimate. And so that's when you call non-emergency, and you would call the non-emergency number. You're still calling our dispatch center like you are when you call 911. The dispatcher would ask some questions, and the dispatcher would try to send an officer out there to check the situation out. Now, the difference between a 911 call and a non-emergency call is something called a priority. So if you're calling 911, they're going to prioritize that call and say, hey, somebody's car is getting, broken into right now. There's a burglary in progress. There's a shooting. There's a bad accident. We're going to send fire, police, EMS right away. And if you have 9 officers, which is typically what we have working on a Richmond street at any given time, a lot of people think it's more than 9. Sometimes there's overlap, but a lot of times it's 9 officers, 1 per beat. They're going to prioritize the emergency calls before they are the non-emergency calls. However, if you call that non-emergency call in, it's going to go to our dispatch center. It's going to go up on a board, and our dispatchers are going to put that out as a detail. That's what we call a call detail in the CAD system. And it's going to go to the officers, MDC, and either somebody's going to be assigned or they're going to take the call and they're going to say, oh, here on Esmond, yeah, I see that we have somebody peering into car windows. Let me send an officer over there. So just wanted to explain to you what that means. Please pre-program that non-emergency number into your cell phone. And if you don't know how to do it, if you have trouble with technology, I know some people are good with it and some people aren't. Ask a kid. A kid will help you. They always do. And they'll help you program that into your phone. And you would want to save that number under, non-emergency dispatch, because nobody wants to try to remember that number. I remember it because I work here, but you may not, so pre-program that into your phone so that you have that there. So a couple other things that we do in terms of what does Neighborhood Watch do? So it helps promote community engagement. If you're in a neighborhood where people actually look out for each other and they call the police and they get to know each other as neighbors on a first name basis, doesn't mean that you have to be best friends with all your neighbors, but you know them. It makes for a more engaging neighborhood. Studies have shown that property values in neighborhoods where people engage in Neighborhood Watch, they go up because they know that neighbors there help to keep the peace. They do call the police. They do get to know each other. So they do all of these kinds of things. And so it's important, to make sure that, those neighborhoods are engaged. Also, just increasing your awareness of what's going on. How many people look at crime stats? Raise your hands. Well, I already know you, Owen. That's cheating. Yes, I've known Owen for a long time, so I know he does. So when you look at the crime stats of what's going on in your area, you're kind of like, oh, wait a minute, there was some catalytic converter theft that happened here. Or there might have been, some arson that happened here. And you're kind of wondering about it. A lot of times people don't know about crime. They're not looking at crime stats. And so that's another way to, get some information from your beat officer and from the police department about what's going on in the community so you can share it. And then it's important to share correct information. I should make sure that I say that. If you look on Nextdoor, I do like Nextdoor, but Nextdoor has its pitfalls as well. I remember there was once a Nextdoor post, I won't name the community, that said, hey, there are people with guns and the police are chasing them and they're jumping in and out of backyards. Now, that actually was not true at all. The police did arrest somebody, but they did not chase them with guns. But by the time you kind of got through on Nextdoor, it was like telephone, and everybody said, this is what happened. You know, what can we do? I'm going to let some people in. I'm going to admit all these folks that came in. Welcome. But it's important for us to be able to understand and know that, you know, it's important for us to get out the information, but we also want to get the right information out there. So that's another benefit of being involved with the program. And also just building trust. Some people have great trusting relationships with the police and they grew up with great relationships with the police. Some people did not. And I'm not here to say every officer is amazing. We have a lot of amazing officers. I think here at Richmond PD, we're very fortunate. But sometimes there's some that are not, and people don't feel as comfortable coming to the police because of various reasons. It might be because of their status or whatever the concern is, but we want to work with everyone, because if you're a victim of a crime, you're a victim of a crime. Okay, so what is a block captain? So the block captain is the leader. And if you're here, I'm not saying you're the block captain, you might be, but it's usually because you are interested in leading. You see a need that's going on in your community and you're like, hey, yes, I want to help get people together. A block captain helps to coordinate and organize a neighborhood watch group. And really, that's what we're here today, is to start a neighborhood watch, to start a group of people who are willing to look out for one another and to report things to the police department. And so a block captain is the main leader in being able to get those things done. And so they might help to call a meeting with some of the neighbors. They might say, okay, you Stan, you take this part of the block. I'm going to take this part of the block. We're going to invite people together. Maybe it's a Zoom call. Maybe it's an in-person meeting. Maybe it's in somebody's garage. And we're just going to talk about like what we can do to get to know one another and also to report some of the crimes that we have going on in the neighborhood and what have we been seeing. And you might live in a relatively safe community where maybe there's not much happening. Good. That's the way that you help keep it there. Or maybe you get together with your neighbors and you find out, wow, there's a lot more going on here than I thought. And so that's a way for you to get together with your neighbors. But the block captain is the one who takes the leadership. The block captain also will help put together a list of the people who live in that neighborhood. So if it's my neighborhood, per se, you know, I might go to my upstairs neighbor, my downstairs neighbor, and I might get all their names and emails and put it together on a list so that we can start to communicate with one another. So the block captain would help take that step. And then the block captain would help schedule some times to get together. And people ask, well, how often in a neighborhood watch do you need to get together? I'm not saying it has to be monthly, because it doesn't. You might get together quarterly. I recommend at least 4 times a year so you kind of know who you're working with. You might get together every other month, but pick a time that works for you. Pick a way that works for you. It may or may not be that working together on, you know, on Zoom works. Some people like Zoom, some people don't. Some people work and so it's easier for them. Some people like in person. Pick the way that works for you. And then once you pick that way that works for you, then you can start planning your meeting sessions out. Then you have the co-captain. So what does a co-captain do? A co-captain would help support a block captain. So maybe the block captain was like, you know, I'm willing to lead this and contact the city to get established, but I really don't have time to do all the connection where I go up and down the block and get everybody's information. Susie, can you help me do that? And Susie might be like, sure, I work from home. I know a lot of these people anyway. I'm happy to do that and collect that information. So it's important for you as a block captain to know the other people in your neighborhood who do that. And then there's also people who are members. And members play important roles because there's all kinds of things that a member can do. So a member is someone who is going to be basically observing and reporting crime and getting to know their neighbors. Now, what a member is not is a complainer. So you don't want complainers in your neighborhood watch group where they complain about everything that goes wrong. But when it comes time to do some work, They're like, oh no, I don't want to do that. You want some members that are going to be working, and you want, if you're going to be a member, to be a member that works. So maybe as a member, you can help volunteer to do something. Maybe you're like, hey, I'll pass out the flyers. I don't mind doing that. Or hey, I'll set up the email tree. I have no problem doing that. Or, hey, maybe I'm willing to host like a little thing at my house. You can use my house to meet with people. It's important that everybody brings a little bit of something to the table. And, if we were doing this to the traditional way, we'd all be sitting out at somebody's house, maybe having some snacks, talking about this like we're neighbors. So it's important for us to keep on doing those things. A couple other things, role of block captains has helped to coordinate the neighborhood watch, just to make sure that people understand like there is a neighborhood watch. And so one of the things you can do after your training today, is you might identify an area of your street that you want to start a neighborhood watch, and you might make up some flyers and say, hey, we're just going to go door to door and say, hey, we're getting ready to start a neighborhood watch. Are you interested in being a part of it? Well, what do I do? Well, we want to make sure that we as neighbors get to know each other, and that you know how to connect with the police department and other services that might be helpful. And then they might say, oh yeah, I'm interested in that. Or they might say, no, I'm not. But the important thing is to connect with those who are interested and get their information. So that would be a great step. And that's something that a block captain can do. And the other thing that a block captain does is act as the liaison with the residents and the police, and that we will work closely with you as block captains. So say there's some kind of issue that's going on in your neighborhood, and you're like, I'm really trying to figure this out. I don't know how to get through to the right person to the city. Can you help me? We can help make those connections for you. So that's some of the things that we love to be able to do for you as well. I think I missed one. Kind of funny with these Zoom screens sometimes. So I'm going to move you guys over because I can see you. So also organize community events and meetings. So that's another role that you can have. And I recommend that you get together as neighbors. You don't just start a neighborhood watch and just sit around and talk about crime all the time. That would be kind of a drag. Like, I feel like I have the best job in the world because I get to work with Richmond residents, but I have the worst job in the world because we sit around and we talk about crime. So I recommend that you don't always talk about crime. You talk about your lives, other things you want, safety, other things that are happening in the community that you would like to see, to help keep people interested. And having some block parties and other things like that are great ways to do that. Now, some other things: neighborhood watch, members and co-captains. So if you're a co-captain, or if you are, a member, you're not immune from this. There's things that you can do too. So observe and report. So that means if I see a car that's parked there and someone's peering in the window, I don't just complain to the block captain and say, hey, did you see, Owen, that car that was parked over there? Can you call that into the police? That's a way not to be a member. The way to be a member of a neighborhood watch is to see that car and to see what's going on. You have the non-emergency number programmed into your cell phone. You pick up the phone and you call. And then afterwards, you can share it with your group saying, hey, I called about this issue and the police came out and they dealt with it. So observing and reporting. And also to stay engaged, come to the events, get to know your neighbors, get to talk to the people who are around you so that you know who you're talking to. The worst thing in the world is for you to be a member of a watch group and only show up when something goes wrong. Get to know people. That's going to make the neighborhood a real neighborhood for you. The other role of a co-captain could be to help to be a liaison with us. So say the block captain is busy or has something else going on and you need to contact the police department or contact us. We're happy to work with the co-captain on that. And co-captains can also be responsible for helping to set up meetings, or some of our groups have done like neighborhood walks or patrols where they've just walked around the block together as a group. We always encourage that. Okay, so setting up a communication system, you have to figure out how are you going to communicate with your neighbors once you set this neighborhood watch up. And so there's various ways to do that. Some people do this through a simple email tree. That's the simplest way to do it. Most people have email, and so you can set that up. Some people like listservs because they're private and you can let people in and out. The only thing about a listserv is you have to have somebody who manages that. And so if you don't have a lot of time for that, you may or may not want to do a listserv. You should have a phone tree, I think, with everybody's phone number, and it should lie with someone who is very well respected in the community, who is not going to give out your phone number. And that usually is the block captain or the co-captain, so that you have that in case there's some kind of emergency. which we know it's not a matter of if, it's when we have a disaster or something happens, you'll be able to call someone. But I recommend, an email tree. Some groups have communicated through Nextdoor and they've started their own private Nextdoor groups. That works for people who are on Nextdoor because Nextdoor kind of does its own verification process. But you figure out the way that's best for you to be able to connect with people. And then have regular updates. So I don't recommend that you email each other incessantly every day. If that happens, number one, your emails will be labeled as spam. And the other thing is you might end up annoying your neighbors by doing that so often. But definitely if something is up in the neighborhood and something happened, you can email. So I do recommend that you set up your communication system so that you guys can stay in contact with each other. And then, when you're communicating with each other, you want to communicate with the police department too. So feel free when you set up your Neighborhood Watch email to include myself and Anna on there. You can also include your beat officers on there. Did you know that? So each beat in the city, how many people know how many beats are in the city? How many people think that the city of Richmond has 3 beats? 4 beats? 10 beats? 9? All right, so we got some veterans here. So you have 9 beats. So you can actually email each of those beats. And when you email them to their beat email, it goes to, we have, an order of operations here at the police department and a chain of command. So it goes first to their lieutenant, it goes to their sergeant, and it will go to the officers who work that beat in that shift. So you can actually send it to all of them. Do not report crime via email. And I know I'm saying it probably to the crowd because you probably have seen this. Do not report crime via Nextdoor. That does not get a police response. I've gotten screenshots of Nextdoor posts like, Michelle, do you know that this happened in the neighborhood? Now I live in Richmond. I may or may not know what's happening to you. I may be on or off. An officer who gets an email might not even be working that day. So make sure you report to dispatch first and then email. But, you can put your beat officers on the emails to let them know what's happening in the community. And so that's important too. A couple other things you can do to get to know your neighbors. Block parties, great idea. Everybody likes to get together, have some fun, barbecue. It's summertime. Get to know who lives there, who doesn't. I have a really neat story of 2 neighbors who lived next door to each other for years. Never knew each other. One worked the day shift, one worked the night shift. And then one day, one of them was home. They called the police on their neighbor because they didn't know who their neighbor was. They had never seen their neighbor in person. And so they thought that their neighbor was breaking into their own house when that wasn't the case. So a lot of these things could have probably been resolved if people got to know their neighbors. So, block parties and things like this are great ways to get to connect with each other. It could be a potluck. It could be like, hey, we're going to do a cleanup and we're going to pick up litter around a park. Encourage introductions. Hey, this is so-and-so. Do you know them? Oh, no, we bought this house 20 years ago. We live 2 doors down. Those are the kinds of things that I think can really help. And a couple of other things, how do you set up your areas? So setting up your areas is very important. I don't have a map here for you to take a look at, but the National Sheriff's Association recommends like a 5 by 5 square foot area for Neighborhood Watch. And so that's like 5 by 5 blocks. Anything more than that, that's like 50 households. You're going to have a really large number of people who connect. So we recommend that you probably don't keep your watch group kind of larger than 50 households. Sometimes there's exceptions, like if you're in apartments or HOAs, and then you can actually probably break those groups down by unit. So, if you live in a really big apartment complex and say you have 20 units, maybe your goal is to get at least 10 block captains. So you can have at least 10 of them covered if possible. Or if you can only start up with 5, start out with how many you can get. I don't think you should feel discouraged if some people don't want to join. Start with the people who do want to join and get them invited. I think the largest neighborhood watch group we ever had in the city of Richmond was an HOA. And I think that was about 150 people. Like we actually literally had to have a school to meet with them. I would not suggest making it that large. But they wanted to do that, and they were very excited about doing that. So I recommend keeping it around 50 households. How small can it be? It could be 5 people. We have neighborhood watch groups that are just one block with 5 people, and that's okay. It's however many people you think would like to join. Apartments, same way, like kind of looking at like how the apartments are structured. And then if you have a larger group, then I definitely recommend having block captains for each unit. So that makes it probably easier. And business watches, we do work with businesses as well who are interested in doing this. A couple other things, understanding diversity. So this comes up a lot, and I want to make sure I talk about it. The first thing I want to mention, and I have to mention about Neighborhood Watch, it is observe and report. We do not ask you to intervene. I had one neighborhood block captain who there was prostitution going on his block, and he decided to chase the Johns down and take the pictures of their cars with his camera. But he was very obvious about how he was doing that. And it's like, that's a really good way for you to get hurt. We're not asking you to intervene. We're just asking you to observe and report, and to recognize that we are in a diverse community here in Richmond. There's people of all cultural backgrounds. We're a very inclusive community, and we want to make sure that everybody feels welcome in the community. So when we have a neighborhood watch, it's important to realize that we're living in a diverse community. You might have people who speak different languages. You may have people who have different cultural customs. And it's important to kind of know that when you're trying to get to know your neighborhood. And it's also important that because some people are acting out in a way that we don't generalize about whole groups of people, even if it was, say, young people. Like I have a lot of complaints from neighbors, like the kids from the school. Well, it's not all kids. It's a group of certain kids that are hanging out together. It's not every kid from, this particular high school that are causing this issue. But it's important when you're communicating with each other, especially on social media or on text where things can get misunderstood, that we understand that we are living in a diverse community, and that we're not looking at generalizations about whole groups of people, and that, we have to really kind of work together. So a couple things I wanted to kind of go over before we kind of open it up for questions, and I have a couple of other things for you, is what are some of the things you can focus on, for your neighborhood watch group? So these are the most common. The most common complaints we hear in Richmond are home security, personal safety, and vehicle safety. Home security, people getting their homes broken into, right? There are things you can do to target harden your home. Making sure that you have a solid core door, is the first step, a really good door, and, really good studs that are going into the door so that your door can't get kicked in. Making sure you have an alarm system, making sure you close your windows, making sure you have working window locks. If you have a sliding glass door, making sure you put a dowel in there so people can't lift up the sliding glass door to get in. Making sure you trim your bushes and hedges, things like that. Having proper lighting, those kinds of things are all helpful for your home. Personal safety, and when we talk about personal safety, that's, next to like some kind of a, shooting or something like that, some kind of a physical assault. Personal safety and robbery is like really the number 2 kind of crime. And we do have a lot of robbery that happens, unfortunately, in our city, whether that's purse snatching or somebody coming up behind. And a lot of times it happens with your kids. It's not necessarily always just older people or middle-aged people who this happens to. It often happens to young people, and they won't report it and they won't tell anybody about it because, sometimes they're scared or, they just don't want to admit that it happens. But it's important to know how to be safe when you're walking down the street. Don't walk around with flashy things that somebody might want to take from you. Keeping in mind your purse, your, whatever you're carrying with you, that you're mindful when you're walking down the street, that you're walking in well-lit paths, that you park close to wherever it is that you're going to plan on doing business. Not that you should live in fear, but just common sense things. And then vehicle safety. Catalytic converters. Have you guys heard about that in your neighborhood? We have heard a lot of that. So there are quite a few Prius drivers. I'm sorry to tell you, if you have a Prius, very, very common thing that we see with folks is, the catalytic converter theft. So those kinds of things, especially vehicle break-ins, usually when someone gets their vehicle stolen in Richmond, it will be returned at some point in time. Sometimes they use it for joyriding. Sometimes they use it to commit crimes. Sometimes they're using it for other things. It usually does come back. They don't end up in chop shops, but just various common things that you can do to help protect your vehicles are important. So these are some of the things you can go over with your group. Tips for being a good witness. So when I call the police, what kind of witness are you? A lot of people are very frustrated when they call the police and dispatch, and they're like, why don't you just get somebody here now? Which I understand. But the dispatcher has to get information to be able to get to you and get to the community. So it's important that when you're talking to a dispatcher, you observe closely. If you can provide things like, what did they look like? What was the appearance of the perpetrator? What were they doing? Did they have any distinguishing features? Did they have light clothing on, dark clothing? What direction were they traveling? Because usually by the time the police gets there, they might have moved up the street or they've gone somewhere else. What was the make and model of their car? Being able to kind of recall details are really important. And they don't all have to be exact or perfect, but if you can routinely train yourself to start looking for details, it really helps. And if you're a naturally detail-oriented person, that's great. If you're not, then those are things that can be learned. It's a learned behavior to start looking for things, so that way when you report something and the dispatcher's asking you questions, you can answer some of those questions. Make sure you stay calm when you're on the phone with dispatch. They're trained to ask questions, and sometimes they can be repetitive to get information they need for the officers. And try to remain objective. Don't draw a conclusion. Just keep it with the facts, because sometimes something seems like one thing and it turns out to be another thing. So just keep it kind of simple and report the facts only. So we talked a little bit about this, communicating with the police, encouraging people to report, timely reporting. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you report something the next day, will we take the report? Yeah, we'll still take the report. Is there any chance that we're probably going to find somebody? Maybe not. Doesn't mean you shouldn't report, but the more timely you can report, the better off it can be. So I do encourage people to report when something happens, so that way we can respond more quickly. And I'm not going to go over all of this, but what I want you to take away from this is, in the long term, what do you want for your neighborhood? Think about the kind of neighborhood you want to live in. The more you invest in it, the more you're going to get out of it. That's just the reality. Is if you live in a neighborhood, I have a great neighbor. He introduced himself to me when I first moved into neighborhood. He worked for another city. He gave me his card and he said, you call me if you need me. I'm over here. If you need something, here I am. We exchanged information. I see him. I ask about him. He is a great neighbor. When we had a neighbor who died, he was the first person to know. That's the kind of neighborhood I want to live in. I want to live in a neighborhood where people know each other. And if something happens, because I actually live by myself, that there's someone around who knows what's going to happen and knows what's going to happen to me. And so that's really the kind of neighborhood I want to live in. And so in order to do that, I have to stay involved with my neighbors. I have to connect with them. I have to know, I obviously work for a police department, so I know my police department as well, and how I can make the most of that relationship there and continue to do that over time. I think we talked about a lot of these things like this. Things you can do to help make your neighborhood watch better is celebrate diversity in your neighborhood. That's important. We're living in a more diverse community, different languages. Be mindful of that. Collaborate with some of your community leaders. I'm so glad we have some of our council members on the call tonight. Yay. That's an important step. And I see we have other community leaders who are here as well. They're here to be supportive of you and your safety. And then also to just, if people tell you like, oh, no, I don't want to get involved in that neighborhood watch. Is that snitching? No, it's not snitching. It's reporting what's going on in the community. I don't want to get involved in a neighborhood watch because I don't want to tell my neighbors all my business. You can tell them as little about yourself as you want to. It really is not something where you have to reveal your whole life story. It's more just about sharing with them, some basic information. And so, it's great. Some neighbors are really close and they're friends. And even if you're not friends, just knowing who your neighbor is. So if something happens, they'll pick up the phone and call is truly important. And so some of the other things that I just wanted to hit before we stop and open up for question is identifying what your community issues are. So I want you in the chat to write down, what are some of your community's concerns? If you had to name like one thing that's the biggest thing that you're seeing right now, what are some of those concerns? And if you could drop those in the chat, that would be great. So we could take a look at some of them. I'm going to read a couple of these out. Tagging. Yes. Fireworks. We just had a legal fireworks forum about a week ago. Yes. And it is fireworks time. I'm surprised I haven't seen my other hat, homelessness and homeless encampments. Mail theft. Oh, there's some, Paul, you hit homelessness. All right. Accidents, human trafficking. Accidents in Richmond, people drive drunk, unfortunately. And our district attorney who's assigned to the police department said, you know, the actual levels of alcohol intoxication, Michelle, are off the charts for people. Like, they're not just driving a little drunk, they're really drunk. So that is something to be concerned about. Drug houses. Yeah. So those things are all, you know, super super important, you know, for us to realize, like, what is your issue? You know, what is the most important thing in your neighborhood? What would your neighbors say the biggest issue is? You know, so those are things that we want to make sure that we are sharing with one another and thinking about. Now, as you drop those, you know, those things in the chat, what are the things that you like the best about your neighborhood? Can you drop that in the chat? Oh, I saw the loose dogs. Practice shooting in Wildcat Canyon. That was a good one. Folks who say hello, friendly, peaceful. Diversity. There's a lot of good things about Richmond. And, you know, the most important thing is our WhatsApp group and you love your neighbors. If you live in a place where you love your neighbors and you have neighbors who will support you and be with you and, you know, kind of say, hey, you know, I noticed that your garage door was open and so I closed it for you. You have something special going on. You definitely do. Okay. I am going to go back because we're almost done with our presentation. So there's a lot of ways you can bring your community together. I'm not going to go over all of them, but, you know, some neighbors choose to do a forum. Sometimes it's with neighborhood councils. Sometimes it's with town halls. Sometimes people have collaborative events, but any kind of event you can be a part of to help your neighbors stay involved, the better. I'm not saying one person has to do it. One person can't do it all. I'll say that again. One person cannot do it all. But if everybody does a little bit, it makes a huge difference. So the next time there's a town hall, you know, invite your neighbors out, you know, and say, hey, we really should tell the city how we feel about this, or, you know, the school district. We talked about some of these neighborhood concerns. Does some of these sound familiar, right? There's a reason I had you drop those in the chat. So blight, auto theft, robberies, other places of concern, right? Home security, homelessness, all those things, right? So I'm going to talk just a bit about homelessness. So my other hat is I help manage the city's core homeless outreach contract. City of Richmond has a camping ordinance. Long story short is before we abate a homeless encampment, that's either a vehicle encampment or that's someone who's enacted structures or someone who's living in a tent, we have to offer them emergency services that have to be available. They can either accept those services and say, yeah, I want it, or they can deny us, like, no, I'm not interested. And then we go through the posting of the vehicle for the 72 hours or the posting of the tent for the 72 hours. So that is the way that we do things. It does add a little time onto the process, not much. Most of the time, CORE can get out to those calls in about 2 days. We had over almost 1,500 individual people that CORE contracted who were homeless last year in the city of Richmond. And so that's a longer talk for a longer day. If you're interested in knowing about homelessness, you can ask me about it. Feel free. So I want to go to questions. And so I'm going to open it up, and this is your time. Before we talk about the questions, feel free to raise your hand and I can call on you, or you can drop questions in the chat. I'll go back and take a look and see if I see any questions that we want to ask. But next steps. So the next steps for you as a block captain is, remember, your goal is to observe and report, to get your neighbors together, to come together. And I would say within the next month, if you can get your neighbors to come together and set up a meeting, you know, whether that's online or in person, see who's interested in Neighborhood Watch. we will help you. We will give you the signage because you registered today. So we'll make sure that you get your window signs. We can work with you long-term on the big metal signs on how to be able to get those installed in your neighborhood. And if you're interested in having your beat officer come to your neighborhood watch meeting, then work with myself and Anna, and we will have your beat officer come out to a meeting. When you set up your meeting, what are you going to talk about? Well, the first thing you're going to do is remember how we identified what's the most important thing in your neighborhood? What's the biggest concern? It could be speeding. It could be drunk driving. It could be the drug house. Identify what your biggest concern is and share that information with the neighbors and the beat officers. And we can work together to see what can we do. I'm not going to lie to you. The police department may not be able to solve everything, but there might be things that we can do to help. And then if there are other parts of the city that we can do as well. And you can schedule that with Anna and myself. We can set those up. Our goal is to make sure that we get more neighborhood watches active and involved. And we do have National Night Out that we have every year. That is a great way for neighbors to have like a getting out, and connection with neighbor block party. We do that, and we've done that for the last 30 plus years, where Richmond neighbors have gotten out and caravaned all over the city and connected with each other. Sometimes it's a neighborhood council, a business, or a community group. And so that's if crime prevention had a birthday, National Night Out will probably be it. So we always have that the first Tuesday in August, and we would love to have you all involved. And before I answer any questions, Carla, I know you're on the line. Did you want to talk a little bit about National Night Out and maybe share a little bit about your story?
Hi there. My name is Carla Perez. I'm a longtime Richmond resident, been in Richmond for almost 25 years. Also, I serve on the Crime Prevention Executive Board for the last 20 some odd years. My story was my husband and I, my husband's was a longtime Richmond resident, and so we ended up moving into this community that he basically said, "Oh no, you don't want to live there." And I said, "Oh, but the units look really nice, and they're really ample on the inside." And he goes, "You don't want to live there." And so we ended up moving in, and I think within the first month, we had multiple shootings in front of our unit. So we got involved. That's how we got involved with crime prevention. Long story short, the apartment building or the apartment complex that I live in, their crime rate has significantly gone down because of the involvement that my husband and myself and property manager at the time was involved. Were able to curtail a lot of the happenings that was going on, alongside of working with the police department, which was very helpful, and having that collaboration with them. So that's the long story short. I'm also the chairperson for National Night Out, and it's just a great way to get to know your neighbors. Come out, turn your porch lights on. So the statistics have shown that the one time out of the year that everybody gets together on their block and turns on their lights and has a party, that's crime has gone down significantly on that specific day. So it's just a matter of, getting together with people. My thing has always been, you moved here to Richmond for a reason, or you've been here in Richmond for one reason or another. Most people want to just close their doors and windows and pretend that the outside world doesn't happen. But there is stuff that's going on and people need to be aware of. And if you're not aware of it, you're just as guilty as the person that is committing the crime, because you're not putting it out there. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Michelle.
Carla. And I appreciate all the work that Carla and we have members of our executive board do. They make this happen. Could not happen without them. I see a couple of hands that are raised, so I'll go in order that I see. I see Vinay and then Claudia. Go ahead, Vinay.
Hi, so Michelle, this is about the homelessness issue. One of the problems is, and one of the kind of bad things about the neighborhood is that when my wife, Joni, she walks around, sometimes she sees some, I'm assuming homeless person just lying there, on the sidewalk somewhere, and it's unclear if the person is sleeping or passed out or taken some bad drugs or is dead. And so, um, just want to know exactly what is the best thing to do in those cases? Because I don't know if we have to call the police every time or
Yeah,
what do we
so
do?
you got a good one. So if someone's passed out and you think they're having a medical emergency, call 911. You know,
Call 911.
so that way we can see what's going on with them. If someone just appears to be homeless, there's two things that you could do. You could either reach out to CORE directly by calling 211, or you can email me. I just dropped my email in the chat, and I can have the CORE team go out and visit the encampment, make the offer of service. And then if the individuals don't accept the help, then we have to go to the next stage where we're going to have to abate the encampment. But we start off trying to offer services. We also partner with A3. So if someone's experiencing a mental health crisis, but say
Mm-hmm.
it's not like a level 3, like where they're threatening to hurt themselves or someone else, and maybe they just need a little bit more support, we'll have the A3 county service come out and offer that mental health assistance. Richmond is also starting its own community crisis response program. So the hope is at some point in time, they'll take on some of those calls where they can help people who are in crisis, but they're not necessarily in crisis where they're violent. But yeah, for right now, feel free to call dispatch if they're in some kind of crisis, or you can email me and we'll try to get CORE out there to make contact with them.
And so because I mean the thing why I'm asking is it's often very hard to tell. I mean it's not an encampment issue. It's an issue of you don't know you don't know if they're asleep or passed out or what, because they are just lying there and you don't want to go too close to them, but it's just hard to tell what the exact situation is. And so you are saying it's fine to just call 911, and if they're asleep, then that's just what it is.
Yeah, if you don't know, because sometimes we don't know if somebody had a
Right.
medical emergency, you can call 911. You know, if you see them moving around, it seems like maybe they're not asleep, maybe they're just laying there or living
Oh,
there,
yeah. Then it's not a problem. I mean, we
yeah,
don't even do anything then. It's
absolutely. You can go a different route, and it
right.
doesn't necessarily have to be a police route, but if someone seems like they're, medically having an issue, call 911.
Okay.
Um, thank you, Vanellia. And I see Claudia, and then I see Jay Ortega. Go ahead.
So you brought up an interesting point with posting it on Nextdoor. I'm one of the people who posts a lot because I live on the corner of 24, so there's just a lot going on. I usually only post it once I call dispatch and I know I hear the siren or I know something is going on. But I also care about my personal safety. I care about being called a snitch. So um, it it's if you can give more guidance on this one, because it is important. I've seen it in the past. If I report something, other neighbors go like, yeah, I have actually a ring camera coverage on this. And especially on our block, I see a lot of neighbors have information on the prostitution that's going on the drug dealing is going on, and it's critical information for you guys. Um, so guidance in how could I phrase it that the public knows you guys are involved?
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I like Neighborhood Watch. It's okay to put things on Nextdoor, but Nextdoor, remember, you're casting a real wide net. I'm actually on a Nextdoor community in Richmond, and I know Nextdoor kind of annexes different communities, but sometimes like you'll see, for example, Point Richmond will come up. You'll see that the incident actually didn't happen in Point Richmond. It happened, 7 or 8 miles away. But next door actually shows it as Point Richmond. So sometimes next door can not be your immediate neighbors. I think that it's better if you have a neighborhood watch is to kind of contact your immediate neighbors who are around you, who you've built a relationship with, rather than sharing a whole bunch of intimate details that you have about a crime situation with a bunch of folks that you don't live next to. That's one of the disadvantages, in my opinion, of Nextdoor. So I'm not saying don't share things on Nextdoor, but remember, is like, if you really want to kind of keep your general area and your neighborhood safe, it's better to have a group of 5 or 6 people who live next to you that you're sharing information with than 20 people who might live 10 miles away. So that's one thing that I can suggest. And in terms of being a snitch, I think you brought up a good point. Sometimes people will say that. A lot of times, honestly, it's tone. I hate to say it, but it is how we say something. It's not making not making an assumption. I always say you can't make good information on, good decisions based on bad information. We may not know why something happens. A lot of times we'll see something and we'll think, this is the reason why this happened. And we don't know, right? So we can just say, hey, we saw this. There's some concern that we have about this, and move it on. There's always going to be people on online communities that want to debate and argue. And sometimes, unfortunately, it brings out the worst in people. But I would just encourage people just to keep it general, keep it casual. If somebody is your neighbor and they really want to know more, they'll private message you and you can have that conversation offline. And who you really need to be sharing this information with is not just your neighbors, but the police department, because a lot of times stuff happens. And I know, Claudia, you definitely do report to PD, but people are sharing stuff they're sharing stuff on Nextdoor or on groups, and they never reported it. They share like, hey, there was trash dumped here. Did anybody call Public Works? No. Hey, this happened over here. And a lot of times it's because people don't know. They don't know who to contact. And so they'll contact the mayor, they'll contact the city council members, but they're not really clear about who in the city they need to contact to get something done. So Anna has something that I'm going to send out to all of you that I hope will be helpful. It is a list of, who to call in the city. Sometimes you guys might like to use the app. But trying to make it simple so that you kind of know who to reach out to if you need some help, if you get stuck on something. So, but that was a great point, Claudia. I really appreciate that. I also see Jay Ortega. Go ahead.
My question is not, well, since summer is coming in soon and we got, I'm not to judge, but like I used to be a teenager myself, and we get bored over summer and we actually, get into trouble. I feel kind of unsure because lately every break we've been having like some issues.
Yeah. So, summertime is a time when we see a lot of young people out. And if you all remember anything about being a young person, we might have some younger people who are on the line. Sometimes just being idle, you just find things to do that may not. Yeah.
I've been shocked a couple times, I ain't gonna lie, because I just cruised down, like walking down the street, and I honestly this one caught me off guard, and I didn't expect to see what I was gonna see, a whole gun coming out of their jacket. So um what do we do in those situations? Because I do speak with my community. I get along with the children around here. But when they put those masks on, I don't know. I already know.
That's a very good question. So I think the thing we want to do most is, if you see something like that where it involves a firearm, call the police. You can call anonymously. So if you don't feel comfortable, like, hey, I don't even want my name, connected to this, you can call the police and you can just say, hey, I'm Jane Doe. I don't want to give my name or whatever it is. Here's my phone number, so you can call me back if you need more information. And this is what's happened. And you can, share that information. If you know that these kids live around the neighborhood and they're getting involved in stuff, that's where it can be a little bit more tricky. If you do have a relationship with some of the parents and stuff like that, they may or may not know what their kids are doing, so that's one thing. I would say, if you have a relationship with the parents, try to get the kids turned on to something that could be positive in their life. you know, whether that's mentoring or getting involved in some kind of sports program or something like that. And then seeing if you can broach a conversation with the parent. That's hard though, because no parent, it can go either way, wants to necessarily hear, hey, your kid's involved in robberies. But I can tell you right now, there are groups of kids right now in the city that are engaged, unfortunately, in robberies. And
Yes.
you know, and they're in the neighborhoods, and they live in the neighborhoods, they go to the neighborhood schools. So
Yeah, okay. And also another thing, for the past week, past 2 weeks, I've been seeing various dogs. So I walk around the street and stuff. And I've seen about 4 dogs. Like, how is that gonna be addressed anytime or any point?
yeah, if you see a loose dog, we actually had animal control on for the crime prevention meeting last month. There's a couple ways you can deal with that. You can call dispatch and we will try to deal with the loose animal. The other thing is, you know, we can work with animal control if there's an animal that is loose and is a danger in the neighborhood. It's tough because animal control does have their hands full, but that's something that we could work with you on. And so if it's something that's happening, another good reason to stay connected to us, let us know, contact me and Anna, and we can try to work with you on some of those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Feel free, other questions. This is your time. And I went back into the chat, you know, and then I really like this, that ask a beat officer to communicate with anyone with a firearm to change their habits. You don't know. I mean, if you have firearms in your home, lock them up. Lock them up. You know, if you are a firearm owner, I'm not judging whether you are or you aren't. Make sure that you're taking care of your firearms appropriately, absolutely, and that your kids can't get a hold of them, because a lot of times, unfortunately, these young people are getting a hold of them, you know, at home or from family members and friends. How do we find out if there's already an existing neighborhood watch in our neighborhood? That's a great question. Anna, you have the list of all the neighborhood watches, right? And so we can kind of get their address and find that out, correct?
Yes, Michelle.
Yeah, that's something that we can do. And other questions I see in the chat is you may even have your national night event help to be funded by the neighbor to neighbor program. Thank you. That is a great point. So if you're going to be doing national night out this year and your neighborhood council, you know, there might be some money available for you to do national night out. Imagine that, to help you out with those kinds of things. So we can help you out and connect you with the neighborhood to neighbor program. We are actually partnering with them for National Night Out. I wish that I could say that it's available for every watch group, because we would love to be able to have every watch group funded. But if you are one of the neighborhood councils that the city had written into the grant, you can actually get support and funding for your National Night Out. And I see Carla. Yes, your hand is up. And I saw AJ. Go ahead.
So real quick, Michelle, can you speak? Because I know that, well, one, the police department is extremely shorthanded. And we have 9 beats, excuse me. And can you speak on the shortness of the staff and how calls may or may not be answered?
Absolutely. So remember I talked to you about the non-emergency number versus the emergency number, and that we have a priority system. We really do have a priority system. And so what that means is, if our basic minimum staffing is we have to have 9 officers, that's 1 per beat, you know. So let's take beat 1, for example. Beat 1 includes Point Richmond, it includes like the Brickyard Cove area, goes into Santa Fe. It's a huge area. It has to have at least 1 officer. Now imagine that officer needs backup. Who are they going to call? They're going to call somebody from another beat, right? To help supplement that. That means that other beat, you know, is going to have calls for service to come in that will be answered, but they're not patrolling their beat because they're backing that other person up. So it does create a staffing issue. I mean, I think that this is a longstanding issue the department has been facing, and the command staff, and I work directly for the chief, and Chief French has been trying to address to attract more people to come to Richmond. We lost a lot of folks during COVID. We lost a lot of folks in the last couple of years, but we are trying to work to maintain that minimum staffing. So what that means is that your calls are prioritized. So if somebody's committing recyclable theft and you're getting really upset about it because the police, like, where are the police? It's been 4 hours. I haven't seen them here. They might have the recyclable theft lower on that priority list if something else is going on at the city at the time. It doesn't mean it's not important. It just means that there's other calls that are taking priority. So that's what that means in terms of our staffing. And we'll continue to work on our staffing. And just so you know, right now we have a total of 115 sworn officers. 81 of those are actual officers, and we have 9 trainees in the academy. I think this was as of a couple of weeks ago. We may have a couple more than that, but that for a city of 10,000 plus is still not a lot. That said, we cannot do it without you. Every single call for service we get comes from residents, so we're willing to work with you. I see another hand raised. Go ahead. I see Vinay. Did you still have your hand raised from the last time, Vinay? And then I see AJ. Go ahead, AJ. And then I believe is it Narari?
It's Nairi.
Nairi. Okay, so I'll go AJ and Nairi. All right, I don't hear AJ. AJ, you might be muted. Okay, we'll go to you, Nari, and we'll come back to AJ.
So I had a quick question. We had I live right by Wildcat Canyon, and we had some folks practice shooting into the canyon. And we're a very unique neighborhood because part of the hill is city of Richmond, part of the hill is city of San Pablo, part of it is unincorporated. And so those are various different police forces that you call. And so our neighbors who are unincorporated were hearing it down the hill. And then unfortunately, it happened right in front of my house. So I saw it. I saw 2 young folks get out of their car, practice shooting into the canyon. And then when they saw the lights turn on at me, they left. I called the non-emergency line. I'm not sure if in that situation it was the right thing to do. So I kind of wanted some advice on what to do the next time this happens. Obviously, turning my lights on and looking out the window maybe wasn't the smartest thing to do, but at the same time, I was like, 4 a.m. I wasn't sure what they were doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless
If you actually witnessed this, then you did the right thing by calling. I called the emergency line in that case because you actually witnessed it. I also think that in that case, and not everybody can afford cameras, having cameras are incredibly helpful. We get a lot of different kind of doorbell cameras, ring cameras, home cameras, and getting a license plate or a face or something like that can make the difference between us knowing who this was, or was this just a couple of people we got a description, but we have no idea what they look like, no idea what their vehicle looks like, and they've driven off. So yes, definitely please call. I got a call from a neighbor today who her car was stolen, and she reported it stolen, got the information in. Well, one of our officers is driving around the city, sees her car, is able to arrest the person who stole her car and get her car back to her. So just by calling in, it does help, so that we have that information. Especially, I would call the emergency line because you actually witnessed, the individuals who were involved in it. And the other thing is just, this is some great information for us to know, so that your beat officer can know this, and say, hey, they're doing shooting in the canyon, maybe it's practice shooting or whatever it is. Can we kind of have an officer go by in the evening time or on graveyard shift just to kind of check it out? It's nothing for an officer on graveyard to park over there for a little while, maybe write a report. So, that might help, and, that might actually discourage people from coming and doing that over there at that time. So that's helpful.
Yeah, we get unfortunately a good deal of that because it's dark. I asked the city to look into putting a light, but it's not possible because it's also that where it would go is technically the parks. But our fence was tagged by Norteños. I didn't know they were Norteños. The city of Richmond came to clean and told me that that's what it was. And so we've seen a lot of kind of odd activity in the middle of the night. But then we also get the teenagers who are just, hanging out. I feel like because I'm a mother, if it happens before 9 p.m. and I'm trying to put the kids to sleep, I just go out there and it's often just teenagers, and they're very respectful. But if it's like at 3 a.m., someone's practice shooting, or two cars drive up and I can see them exchanging things between the cars, then it's a lot more concerning. And I have been calling it in, so it's good to know that I should call the emergency line and not the non-emergency. And how would we be able to get the contact information for our beat officer so that we could introduce them to our neighbors?
So for everyone who hopefully you
Sure.
registered, if you did not register, drop your information in the chat so Anna can pull that up and we'll send you the information. Like just drop your information in the chat. We'll contact you, get your actual street and location, and then we'll let you know who your beat officer is. But in that area, it sounds like you guys are beat 7.
Yeah.
So that would be PD beat 7 at richmondpd.net. So I'll drop that in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rochelle, and thank you, Anna.
You're welcome.
Michelle,
Yes.
did we pass on the 233 number, non-emergency? Everybody familiar with that?
Yes, we did. But AJ, I know you're good at calling that. Can you share that with people?
I knew you were going to do that.
He's
Okay.
been doing this for longer than I have. So,
Well, first of all, the number is 510-233-1214. 233-1214. Non-emergencies information. To give that information to would be very helpful. A lot of times things are not an emergency, like right now. And so when
I
you
provided Michelle. It's already.
yes, that's why I was going to say she put that on, and that's really a good mainstay for things before they escalate, or if you see somebody's hanging around and it looks suspicious, you don't want to call 911 because it's not an emergency. Or you see a dog that you say, a lot of these things that you were talking about, not an emergency. Or if you see somebody passing whatever you're talking about, that's really not an emergency. So you call it in and just make sure that they are aware of what's kind of going on around you. So I don't want to get too lengthy, but that's basically what I was going to say. Utilize that 233 is very, very helpful. And you can do it anonymously. So you don't have to give up your name and so forth like that. So that's it. That's all I had.
no, I appreciate that. And AJ, if I can pick AJ out like I did with Carla, has been one of our longstanding community leaders for a long time. And he is president of the Belden Woods Neighborhood Council. And he really does encourage people to call in that area. And I know in that area, people see a lot of human trafficking, other things like that. He works with Lieutenant Lucas. The beat officers come to his meetings, and he does a great job, just coordinating his neighborhood. He's like one of the people who I would hold up as an example. And it's just as simple as that, getting your neighbors to do that and making sure that they're calling in. If you take nothing away from this tonight, make sure that they do that. So thank you, AJ. I really appreciate that. We'll make sure that is already, I'll send you a copy of my presentation with all the numbers in there. But we'll also make sure that we send you a copy of some of those numbers so that you can share that.
And I'd like to say Richmond is the greatest place in the world to live. And if it's not, why not? And if it's not, what are you going to do about it? That's the question. Thank you.
That's right. If it's not, why not? And what are you going to do about it? That's the way I feel. I feel like I love living in Richmond, and I want to make Richmond better. I don't want to be told by somebody, well, you should just move. I don't want to move, and especially for those of us who have, taken time to invest here. If you bought your home, a lot of us can't move in California. So we're going to make sure that the place where we live and pay taxes is a safe place. And to do that, we have to invest. I see, Claudia, you have your hand up, and just checking to see if there are any more questions in the chat, but go ahead, Claudia.
2 questions. One is simple. Is there anywhere funding where neighborhood watch groups can get gear if they go out on safety patrols at night? So simple question. And second question, just informative. How well do present neighborhood watches communicate with each other about their main crime or main impact issues they're dealing with, because I think it's helpful if neighborhood watches communicate and share, for example, the practice shooting, because in my block, I might see that car racing by after they robbed a cell phone or something. I've seen it with something that happened recently here. A couple of neighbors communicated and we could piece together a story. So how well do neighborhood watches communicate? Is there a network that's functioning, or is this something you encourage that we set up?
Well, that's a great question. So neighborhood watches typically communicate with one another, within their neighborhood watch group. But sometimes if they're close by, we have groups that do communicate with each other. It depends on how close they are. So one of the things we could do is if you're interested in communicating with some of the other neighborhood watches by your neighborhood watch area, we can connect you with them, and we'll connect you with the block group leader, and then you can connect with them about things that you think might be important. So that is a great suggestion. In terms of money for gear, if there are people who need gear for, litter pickup and other things like that, those are things that we might be able to help you with at the city. We have a tool lending library. We can purchase vests. So if that's something that your neighborhood is really interested in doing, let me know, and we can try to see if we can make that happen. So those are some great questions. I also see some questions in the chat, and before we close out, I want to make sure I get to them. How many block parties per neighborhood per year are covered by insurance? I think that's what the city, and Stephanie Nye runs the Community Services and Affairs Division for neighborhood councils. And so I think neighborhood councils get like one block party covered by insurance per year. If you're planning on having an event as a neighborhood watch, I would say reach out to me and let's see what we can do. If you need to shut the street down, we usually can work with you on that. And if it's something the city can coordinate with you, then if we co-sponsor it, then you don't need additional insurance. So let us know.
Michelle,
Yes.
I included the link for somebody who wants to register, so it's already included over there.
Thank you for doing that, Anna. I appreciate that. The other thing I saw that was in here that I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to connect with is people who are in the process of establishing a neighborhood council. So neighborhood councils and neighborhood watches are a little bit different. A neighborhood watch specifically is focused on safety, whereas neighborhood councils might be, they want to put, a store in your area and they're coming to you to ask you more about it. They want to find out more about what the neighborhood thinks about something. So it's a little bit more expansive outside of just the scope of, crime and safety. So there are neighborhood councils that are registered with the city. And if you want to register as a neighborhood council, I would reach out to Stephanie Nye, and I would reach out to the Community Affairs Division, because there's a process in the RNCC to do that. The RNCC, for those who don't know what that is the Richmond Neighborhood Coordinating Council. And so kind of like Chicago, they're like wards, but we don't get the right to endorse as neighborhood councils. There are districts within the city of where people live. And the city comes and connects with those neighborhoods around things that are happening in those neighborhoods within the city. So the Richmond Neighborhood Coordinating Council is made up of the neighborhood council presidents of all of those neighborhood councils that exist in the city. And they meet every second Monday, and I believe 7 p.m. And you can either join them on Zoom online, or you can go down to the city council chambers and you can hear about what's happening in the city. It's a great place if you've never gotten involved in kind of Richmond local issues, to get involved and say, hey, I think we should, do this, or I think we should advance lighting. That is a great place to be able to share information. And most of the city staff is there. So outside of city council, I would say definitely go and visit the RNCC. And we can include a link to the RNCC for those who are interested. So I want to be respectful of time. So I'm going to take one last question before we close out and do some next steps. But I see Jay Ortega, go ahead again.
Sorry.
You're fine.
I actually wanted to ask a question. Is there any volunteering at the RPD or in the firefighter? Because I remember last meeting last year, you guys had brought that out.
Yes, yes. If you want to be a police volunteer, we can do that. So if you want to work inside the building and maybe do something for us inside, we do have you go through a police background, but there is a process to do that. And if you give your information to Anna, we'll work with you and we can coordinate with you to do that. The fire department has the same kind of program set up. And they also have their CERT training, their emergency preparedness training program. So that would be a great way to volunteer that way. If you want to kind of, help us at community events and other things like that, you don't need to have to go through the background process. You could come and join us if that's something you'd like to do. So we would love to have you. And I'm sure Carla would love to have more people who are interested in, joining her and joining the board and what they're doing. So yes, please send us your information and we can find out what you're interested in.
Well, I'm actually going to school for, administration of justice, so it would be a great experience.
That would be great. Anna, who works with us now, she started out as a volunteer. She came to me and she said, I'm doing some volunteer for my criminal justice class. And that was over 10 plus years ago. And then we were able to bring her back on as staff this year. So it's, funny the way that those stories kind of connect. So we would love to have you. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you. And I know that you have other things to do. Thank you for taking out your evening to be with me. I hope this was valuable to you. So first of all, yes, you're going to get everything here. You'll get a copy within a day or so of this presentation. You will also get a copy. I would share this with KCRT with the link so that you can share this with your neighbors who haven't had a chance to view it. We will also be in touch with you so that you can pick up your window signs. Your window signs are already available. Anna has been stuffing window signs all week to make sure that they're ready for you. So we'll have some time for you to either be able to pick that up or get those mailed to you. And then what we're asking as next steps within the next month or so, let's give us, the next 6 weeks. If you have a group that is interested in starting a neighborhood watch, or maybe you're interested in building on a neighborhood watch that's already there, let's try to get at least a meeting set up, with your folks, and we can help you with those things. Please reach out to Anna and myself so that we can give you some ideas of what you can do for an agenda, how you can outreach to people. If there was anything in this presentation that was like a little bit over your head and like, where do I start? We can kind of work with you and come up with some next steps. But I would say, start with your block. If you could just get like maybe 5 or 6 people on your block. Hey, are you interested in a watch group? Great. Can I get your information? Maybe you don't want to meet this month or next month. Like we're going to meet, after the 4th of July. Fine. Set up a time to meet. And then contact us if you would like your beat officer to try to make it to that meeting so we can schedule that, and pick your topic, pick what is most important to you, like what you dropped into chat, so that you can talk about what some next steps could be to try to address those issues. So thank you, everyone. And I want to thank Anna. Thank you for all the work that you've been doing and coordinating with me. She is great. I love having her by my side. Thank you to Carla and Vinay and Julie, who's on our board. And I see some other folks who have on our board. Thank you so much for being involved and engaged in Richmond. You are the best part of Richmond. So I hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a great night.
Bye, Carla.
Bye.
Bye.